I'd like to tell you a little bit about Yoga Synergy. Yoga Synergy is a modern take on postural yoga that's got a heavy influence from exercise physiotherapy and Qigong. To simplify it, we can think of it as a practice made up of three different parts. The first part being the joint movements practice. The joint movements practice, sometimes considered similar to CARs, controlled articular rotations, or to the practice from Hatha Yoga called Pavanamuktasana, is where we work through each joint complex. And with each joint complex, we explore both the simple movement of the joint as well as the associated movements of the joint. And that is when one joint moves, what other joints follow. From there, we learn all the way to the core, to the center. And then we reverse engineer it and figure out, if I'm going to move my wrist, what do I have to do with my core? So through the joint movements practice, very often likened to Qigong, Tai Chi, it's something that ends up teaching us how to move. The second part is the spinal movements practice, which is a set of specific movements, usually done standing, in which explores the different movement planes of the spine. So it's basically a very simple standing shape with a very simple set of spinal movements, so we can learn them really precisely and really accurately, embellish them a little bit, but learn how to move the spine from the spine, rather than putting the body in a complex position and then trying to figure it out. So once we've explored the spinal movements practice, we then explore what we would call Vinyasa Yoga, modern yoga, in which we take the lessons from the joint movements practice, the lessons from the spinal movements practice, and we put them together within the complexity of the shapes of modern asana. Downward facing dog, warrior two, side angle, triangle, camel pose, you name it. It's always combinations of joint positions, spinal movements and actions, sometimes quite complicated combinations. And when we approach this, we don't look at each pose as an individual entity. We rather look at each joint position and each spinal position, as we did in the first two practices, and we put them together a little bit like a jigsaw. So we look at a camel pose and we go, oh, it's the same as this spinal movement, and which position the shoulders are in, and therefore what are the actions of those. So it's not so complicated or tricky, but rather it's actually quite a simplistic way of looking at things. It gives you really safe, strong, accessible yoga. It's not a yoga that's only for fit people. It's not a yoga that's only for not fit people. It's a yoga kind of for everybody. And I'm really proud to say that that's what I teach, and that's what we teach here, and that's what I teach on my trainings and retreats and everything else. So, see you later.